I am 1 month late in reviewing this, but I decided to review it because it was a very good documentary. WWE did an original special on Triple H, and it was basically his entire week of WrestleMania. And just by watching this, it's incredible to know the amount of energy and the amount of excitement and the amount of immediate attention that WWE gets during WrestleMania week compared to the rest of the year, in particular the middle of the summer, which is right now, and nothing is happening. You compare 3 months ago to now, it's just night and day. No one gives a shit about anything. There's no excitement. It's just WrestleMania just sucks the life out of everything, and it's like WWE doesn't care for the rest of the year. Anyway, we start this documentary off on the Friday before Raw's go-home show before WrestleMania, so it's about 10 days. He's in WWE headquarters. We see him going through it. It's kind of cool seeing in the building, it's WWE. I don't think they do tours, but it is kind of cool seeing how it's done there. I think they're moving from Stamford to Florida soon, probably Orlando, I'd assume. And it'll probably be closer to the Performance Center, but it'd be a cool tour if you're a wrestling fan, if you ever got that opportunity to go to WWE headquarters. So next, he gets done with Washington. That was the go-home show for Raw. Then he goes to Triple H, and they're in Los Angeles. They do media. They meet with Rick Rubin, who is a music producer who works with the WWE. He has the long white beard, if you didn't know, and he does a lot of media obligations, doing interviews. Stephanie does a lot of it, too. It's like they are very busy during WrestleMania week. And then his next stop is back on the East Coast. So he was on the East Coast and he had to go to the West Coast in LA to do media, and now the East Coast was WrestleMania, so it's in New York. And when he's back there, he goes to a sports show. It is an FS1 show, and they're promoting a show that's going to happen on the WWE network once WWE makes the move to Fox, which will be kind of cool. I'm actually excited to see how they pull it off. Also, I think the show he was on was called First Things First. And he's talking a lot about how he wants to represent WWE better, and he kind of puts down the attitude era down a bit, because he talked about how back in the 90s would be like a joke when he was doing interviews. I'm thinking to myself, the company was so much bigger back then than it is now. It might not be making as much revenue because you don't have as much revenue streams, but to compare the popularity of WWE right now as it was 20 years ago doesn't even come close. And secondly, it's like he wants to make wrestling like a sport. That's how he views it. I can see that certainly with NXT. So he's in New York City, and his next place to be, which is a really big deal, is NXT TakeOver New York. So this show is probably their biggest takeover show because it's a takeover in WrestleMania in New York City. So it's probably their biggest. This was, I thought, maybe the best takeover card of all time. It's either this or the one the year before at WrestleMania, which was in New Orleans. And that was before WrestleMania 34. So it's either the one before 34 or 35 is the best takeover. It's a toss-up because this was an amazing show. And he's giving them a pep talk. He talked with Jason Albert there, who was the head trainer in NXT. He talks with Shawn Michaels, who works there. It's funny. Everyone's dressed in suits. Shawn's dressed in, like, regular clothes. I mean, that's what he is. He does a great job of motivating the talent. He gave them a great speech. We see him meet Johnny Gargano's family, and Gargano beat Cole to win the title on that show. And then, of course, the show actually airs when Gargano loses to Cole. This airs immediately after that at the 25 show in Connecticut. So the next big place that he's going to have to be at is the Hall of Fame. And this is where he gets inducted. We see him interacting with X-Pac and Road Dogg before the show. So we see a lot with DX interacting backstage before the Hall of Fame ceremony. We see them rehearsing their big tank entrance, and that was definitely a really memorable Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Probably the more memorable ones. Not for the right reasons. He had the whole incident with Bret Hart, but he also had DX giving a fun speech. He had Triple H taking the inside jobs at AEW, taking several digs at them. A lot of inside jokes. I thought it was actually a really entertaining speech and a really entertaining Hall of Fame that year. And the Hall of Fame is usually pretty boring because some of the speeches will just go on forever, but I thought this year's was really good. And he reveals that before the Hall of Fame, 45 minutes before that, he was at some business summit with WWE. So they have a lot of business meetings during this WrestleMania week. So yeah, it's very busy for everyone. There's definitely a nice moment when he talks to Kathy, who is China Joni's sister. He talks about giving it closure, which was actually a nice moment. We know, before China died, her and WWE went through everything. Everything started after Triple H went on the Steve Austin podcast on the WWE Network and talked about how she couldn't be in the Hall of Fame because of her porn career, basically. And then, she got really offended by it. They went back and forth, and she went on podcasts, and there was an incident with X-Pac. So it was really sad that, of course, she dies a year later. And, he talks about getting closure, and, it's a really sad situation. So after he gets done with the Hall of Fame with their speech, he goes immediately to the stadium at MetLife, and this is 1 o'clock, so it's the same night, and he sees the WrestleMania set. That was pretty cool. That's actually cool to see him, that he's so committed that he immediately goes to WrestleMania after he's inducted to the Hall of Fame to see the whole set. I don't know why he was necessarily there. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, but I guess maybe for the documentary he had to go. So once we are at WrestleMania, we see him interact with wrestlers. You see him come out for Hall of Fame before his match later in the show. They did the whole thing with DX. I thought it was actually a little bit disrespectful to some of the other Hall of Famers. I bet Bret Hart probably wasn't too happy about it. I can just imagine for some reason. Anyway, he has his match with Batista. They don't show his entrance. I would have liked to seen him do more with his entrance because it was really high production. It was basically a Mad Max entrance. The match with Batista, which was a bore fest. The match was very boring. No one cared about that match. Every single Triple H WrestleMania is the same. It's the same formula. He goes out with this giant, spectacular entrance. It can be a king entrance, when he has a woman with him, with Charlotte, Sasha, and Alexa that one year. With that giant throne, that was probably his best entrance. He has the Terminator entrance, the zombie entrance, the motorcycle entrance, 2 years with Stephanie, and now this Mad Max entrance. What usually happens, he goes out and he works the crowd into utter silence. And that happened again. It's always a 25-minute match. He always has to have these long matches. And the match with Batista wasn't a horrible match. It was okay. I thought their match they had at WrestleMania 21 was better. And that wasn't that good either. But it was like, does this need to be this long? And Batista did an interview recently. I'm glad I talked about this after he did this interview with Chris Jericho. He says he originally wanted the match with Triple H at WrestleMania to be Hell in a Cell, but Vince McMahon said no for some reason. I don't know why, but it would have been cool to do that Hell in a Cell match. Anyway, he finishes the match with Batista. He wins. He then goes backstage and watches the women main event, Charlotte, Becky, and Ronda. And Becky wins. He hugs Becky after the match. He says he's proud of him. He hugs Ronda and Charlotte too. WrestleMania ends, and then they show him at the end of WrestleMania after all the dust is settled. He talks about how it's the off season and how next week or tomorrow, once he walks back in the curtain for Raw, the new season starts. That's how I think of WWE anyway. I look at it as a giant season. WrestleMania is the season's finale. The next year is the next beginning of the new season. So that was it. It was pretty good. It was a good documentary. Happy I watched it. I enjoyed it. And I'd recommend people watch it. It was a good documentary. It shows WrestleMania week, and it shows Triple H during his long week, and I thought it was really well done. So another good documentary on the WWE Network. They always produce good specials. This was another good one.